The genesis of this session for us was two things, really. In our practice, we've been handling a number of breaches, and through those there is a common thread of what we would call generally avoidable security mistakes. And don't take our word for it. If you look at all in the literature, by which I mean enforcement actions, the same theme comes through. A lot of the errors that one reads about, and we use the ICO for most of our examples, and Kwan is going to talk about those. Many of the errors look generally to be ones that ought to be quite avoidable, whereas a lot of what we see in the headlines and perhaps amongst you certainly, and we do, what we hear from boards is that there's a sort of unstoppable, very complex environment out there and there's nothing we can do. And so that was our starting point, the genesis of the session. And from that we thought, if we can try to do a bit of demystification, that will be a good thing. However, we're going to start with a stereotype. So, spoiler alert, if you don't like stereotypes, look away now. There you go, that's the stereotype. That's apparently how IT and information security people see the world. It's a black and white thing. They deal with specifications. They deal with precision. Whereas all of us lawyers, I told you it was a stereotype. Since the age of 10, grey has been our favourite colour, hasn't it? We may have been a bit older before we realised there were 50 shades of it, but there we are. That didn't really seem to us to describe the disconnect very well, that stereotype, and we thought that there's more to it than that. So instead we put up a true or false sort of axis, which was meant to come up one by one for extra suspense, but never mind. Let me start with that first one, because we've had several comments. Those of you who were in Peter Wood's session will have remarked this, but so the weakest link in the information security chain is still humans, true or false. And Baroness Neville-Rolfe made a comment about it as well. I think what Peter said was manipulating people is far easier than breaking through firewalls. That one seems to us simple and true. One thing we note with interest is the increasing number of organizations that we talk to who are running fake phishing campaigns for their own employees. So in other words, they do a campaign for their own employees without telling them, and what they're then seeking to do is to analyze the statistics that come back. In terms of things like the number of employees who have or have not opened the email, first of all, I suppose, but secondly, clicked on the link, and heaven forbid, given away some of their credentials. And what they are doing is analyzing those stats and trying to figure out whether people even know where they might send a suspicious-looking email. Do they know the address? Really simple things like that, which are actually an important product of that sort of exercise. And we remark that because it doesn't seem to us a particularly expensive or complicated way immediately to start raising awareness amongst employees about information security. So put a more positive way, your workforce is actually your first line of defense rather than your weakest link. That might be the output after a bit of training and awareness raising with them. IT people are information security experts. One that we, of course, be careful here, there'll be lots of you in the room. No doubt many of you are. I'm a lawyer by training. I won't be doing your conveyancing or your divorce or employee stuff because I don't know how to do it. I don't know much about it. Similarly, IT is a broad church, and it's not obvious to us that this is clear when one talks to really senior executives that actually they don't have a chief information security officer, they have a CIO, but maybe they need both, and they're separate functions, albeit working very closely together. These things have all struck us. The last three on the list I'm not going to say much about. They've come from others rather than us. But I'll remark on just one of them. Market forces will deliver the necessary level of information security. That's evidently, so far as one can tell, not the case, because we keep reading about them. I'm not sure whether the law will either. We haven't seen a conclusive survey from the US where they've had data breach notification in most states, and over a period of time. They've, of course, progressively been introduced, I think, in about 47 states now. We haven't seen any conclusive evidence in research as to whether, in fact, the law there has improved information security. That's an open question, because some of you may set me right on that. And we would welcome that, because it seems to us that it's an obvious question to ask, and there ought to be conclusive information about that, or research, I should say, and we haven't found anything that's really conclusive.